Okay, hi everybody and welcome and thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight's speaker is Abby Hamlin, this year's Edward P. Bass Distinguished Visiting Architecture Fellow. The Bass Fellowship was made possible by a generous endowed gift from Ed Bass, a 1968 graduate of Yale College and a member of the class of 1972 at the Yale School of Architecture. Ed Bass was also a member of the Yale Corporation from 2001 to 2013, and he has continued his involvement at the university in addressing stewardship responsibilities for Yale's extraordinary collection of buildings and in moving forward with new ones. Since his graduation from Yale, Ed has continued his professional life on two important issues in today's discourse, the environment and the city. As a developer, he is responsible for the revitalization of the once moribund core of Fort Worth, Texas. And his visionary work on environmental issues is decades long and includes support of the Yale School of Architecture and the Peabody Museum. The Bass Fellowship enables the school to pair a leading developer with an architect to offer an advanced design studio. Such pairings make possible the kind of exchange between sophisticated architects and equally sophisticated clients that can make for some exciting architectural projects in the studio, just as it can do, if perhaps not often enough, in real life. In 2005, Gerald Hines was the first Bass Fellow, teaching alongside Stefan Banish, and subsequent Bass studios have included London-based developer Sir Stuart Lipton, teaching with Richard Rogers, New York-based Catherine Farley, then the senior managing director of Tishman Speyer, who has joined in the advanced studio with me. And others include New York real estate developer Douglas Durst, who taught with Bjarke Engels, the Brazilian developer Rafael Berman, who taught with Professor Adjunct and Associate Dean Sunil Bald, Jonathan F.P. Rose, who taught with Sarah Caples and Everardo Jefferson on a project in Harlem, and Los Angeles Dodgers Senior Vice President for Planning and Development, Janet Marie Smith, who taught with Alan Plattis and Andre Harwell. All of the Bass studios have been unique and extraordinary, and I do not think that any other school of architecture has anything quite like it in their studio offerings. So that brings me to Abby Hamlin. Abby Hamlin holds a BA from Sarah Lawrence College and a Master of Urban Planning from Princeton University. She currently serves on the board of the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation, the Actors Fund Housing Development Corporation, Community Solutions, and Art Omi. Previously, Ms. Hamlin was a member of the board of the Alen Institute for Public Architecture and was its chair from 2007 to 2010. She led the organization of numerous design events and competitions as well, and her firm's award-winning developments include several highly regarded low-rise projects in Brooklyn, leading the New York Times to credit her work as a catalyst for the resurgence of townhouse development. Currently, Hamlin Ventures is participating in a creative collaboration with nonprofit Bakehouse Arts, an affordable housing developer, Urban Related, to plan an art-based affordable live-work community in Miami. Abby Hamlin's talk tonight is titled Creative Collaboration, a Strategy for Impactful Change. It focuses on her experience as a creative developer and her use of creative partnerships and collaborations to have public impact. Abby Hamlin is one of a handful of women to have founded and sustained a successful real estate company in the competitive New York City market. Her company is design-driven and human-centered, yet it has achieved the financial benchmarks that the development business expects. So she has proven that profit and purpose can coexist, and tonight I trust she will show you what that means. The fact that Abby has broken some glass ceilings is impressive, but what I really admire about her is that she did this while honoring her core values about cities and about people. The breadth of her civic involvement and her sincere interest in and knowledge of architecture is equally impressive. She is a developer who is a true partner in design thinking and one whose design ideas are worthy of our respect as we all find new ways to collaborate in order to shape a better world. Please join me in welcoming Abby Hamlin tonight. Following the lecture, Abby will be available to answer questions. Please type your questions into the Zoom Q&A feature, and our student moderator, Ruchi, who's on your screen now, will present them to Abby. And Abby, you and Ruchi can wrap up the evening whenever you like, when we're done with questions. So thank you, and Abby Hamlin.
Wow. Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Dean Burke, for that wonderful introduction. And thank you as well to Ed Bass, who unfortunately I have yet to meet, but who I really appreciate, had the foresight to create and sponsor the Edward P. Bass Distinguished Visiting Fellowship that I'm the recipient of this year. The purpose of this fellowship is to provide architecture students with an opportunity to learn about development decision-making and gain insights about how to communicate their design ideas to developers like myself and other clients. But in this extraordinary year, merely focusing on routine development practice is just not enough. Right now, throughout the world, cities, countries, and their inhabitants are facing unprecedented challenges brought on by a global pandemic, climate change, and massive social, racial, and economic inequities. Putting on blinders and conducting ourselves as if nothing needs to change in the face of this suffering is neither good for the world nor for us, as we strive to find purpose and meaning in the work that we do. The multi-layered crises we face today offer a powerful moment of reckoning for everyone. Dean Burke recognized this in her opening keynote of the semester when she called for all of us to think about an architecture of the greater good, one that acknowledges the needs of the many rather than the few. Tonight and throughout the Bass Studio, I'll expand on Dean Burke's themes as I share with you how I've crafted a creative career and a successful business that have been both personally satisfying and socially impactful. Okay, let me share my screen here. Okay. Share. Okay. So I've titled this talk, I'm just going to turn this, there we go. I've titled this talk, Creative Collaboration, a Strategy for Impactful Change, because tonight I want to instill in each of you a desire to participate in change by using your innate creativity and by collaborating with others, including developers, for greater impact. Often, especially as students, but even as we advance in our careers, the problems of the world seem so overwhelming that we think change is out of reach. Not so. Every individual has the power to align his, her, or their artistic, creative, career, and financial objectives with goals that lead us to a better place. No single person can make the systemic changes that we need, but every single person can make a contribution that helps us move forward on that path. This evening, I'll talk about some of the ways I've channeled my energies towards social good. I'll share with you my enthusiasm for and belief in the promise of design and creativity to improve people's lives. And I'll highlight two creative collaborations that demonstrate the power and pleasure of collaboration as a force for change. Whoops. Okay. I'll start by borrowing a question from an artist whose work I admire, Nick Cave. And here he asks us, how do you want to exist in the world? And how are you going to do the work? Artists like Nick Cave, Theaster Gates, Rashid Johnson, and others are Black men who contend with their marginalization through powerful artwork, and in the case of Theaster Gates, through real estate development as well. I interpret Mr. Cave's question here as a plea to all of us to find our human values and take action individually and collectively to start a human-centered thought process about change. The way we can do that is by understanding and making a commitment to the greater good. The greater good is a simple enough notion. It refers to the interests we hold in common and that are shared and beneficial for all or most members of a given community. If we believe that our continued existence depends on shared destiny, it improves the odds that we will choose a public interest approach to our challenges, rather than persevere with, I'm rolling my eyes here, politics as usual, design as usual, and business as usual. But working towards the greater good is not just about warding off an impending catastrophe, like climate change, for example. As humans, we instinctively make decisions based on our own needs and wants above those of others. We do so first as a means of survival. No one in this virtual room, however, is making choices in order to improve their odds of survival. We are making decisions from a much more privileged perch. Our choices are based on the aspirations we have for creating a meaningful life. With that privilege comes responsibility. The responsibility to care about others less fortunate than ourselves and to pursue a more just and sustainable world through the work that we do. Now, there are many ways that architects and developers can contribute to the greater good. The task of choosing the right way for you becomes a lot easier if you accept, as I have, that the fields we've chosen for our careers, architecture and development, are by their very nature public acts. Think about it. Every time we build a building, we change the face and experience of a city or a place. We alter the composition and conditions of a neighborhood. We affect the environment, and we create spaces in which other people, human beings, live, work, and play. There's just no getting around it. Our decisions affect others, and they do that either for better or for worse. Based on this view, every project we pursue, regardless of type or client, must take into consideration its impact on the public. This is a matter not only of what we build, but also of where we build and how we build. To paraphrase Paola Antonelli, Senior Curator of Design at MoMA, quote, "Everything is designed one way or another. We can design well for excellent outcomes, or we can design poorly. The choice is ours." My choice is always to design well, not only to achieve my private goals, which include personal creative expression, artistic excellence, and profit, but also to design well for the cities and people who are affected by the buildings I build and whose lives can either be enhanced or made worse by my actions. Now, here's a great example of what I mean, a project that is designed well for all of the reasons I just cited. And it's a project that happens to be run by a former Bass Fellow, Jonathan Rose. And Jonathan Rose Companies partnered here with Phipps Houses to produce a project that really shows what you can accomplish through design and development if you put people first. The project not only provides housing, but creates a healthy, safe, and affordable community for those who live there. Whether it's the development of these community gardens for healthy eating, or the natural cross-ventilation provided to each unit, or the medical center on the ground floor, or the cultural programming that occurs regularly in the courtyard, or the sustainable design measures that were incorporated into the development's design. These developers didn't stop at creating apartments. They didn't stop at visual or aesthetic excellence. Instead, they sought to honor and significantly improve the lives of residents by building a thriving, affordable, sustainable community. I have no doubt that everyone listening this evening wants to design well. But wanting to design well and actually designing well are two different things. It's not easy to simultaneously achieve artistic excellence, business success, and public betterment. But as I'll show you in just a few minutes, where there's a will, there's a way. And that way involves the use of both objective and creative thinking. Objective thinking helps us analyze and judge the feasibility of our options, but it takes us only so far. Our best thinking and our best results occur when we combine objectivity with creativity, which engages our imaginations and boosts our willingness to explore and experiment. I rely heavily on creativity, both my own individual creativity and the creativity of others through collaboration. You see, I subscribe to the view that creativity matters. It matters a lot. Creativity is what drives our progress, and progress is what drives our opportunities. I do not, however, subscribe to what I call the myth of creativity, which is the belief that to be creative, you must either be artistically talented or an inventive genius. Instead, I believe that all human beings are creative, and our intrinsic creativity, whatever form it takes, is worth listening to. And that's exactly what I do. I listen to my own creativity, and I listen to the creativity of others. And that's what has enabled me to have social impact, even as I achieve the objective goals that are expected of a real estate developer. At times, architecture encourages the myth of creativity, suggesting that the design of a building is the result of a singular talent, i.e., the architect's. That's both incorrect and somewhat narcissistic, since buildings are never designed and built solely by their architect or by any other single individual. Buildings are always the result of creative collaborations. Dean Burke made this point very clearly in her keynote speech. She mentioned the long list of consultants and contractors with whom architects typically collaborate to complete their buildings. But she left out one important party: developers. While it's true that developers are your clients, not your colleagues, we are also your essential partners because we are a primary conduit for your design implementation. Recognize, however, that developers are not just financial engines. Developers, like architects, are visionaries. We have our own opinions about design and about how we want to build a building. Sometimes this causes tension between us, but if our partnership rests on a shared vision and shared core values, then the fact that a developer is a pragmatic visionary who knows how to get things built is an asset to us both. Right now, given where we are in this world, I see our de facto partnership as an opportunity. Since we routinely work together to build buildings, why not use our collaborations more expansively? Why not identify additive goals that enable us both to do more for the greater good? In fact, I have an invitation for all of you. There is nothing I would enjoy more at this stage of my career than to think creatively with you about how to make the world a better place. Dean Burke knows this, and last year invited me to work with her on a restorative justice project that she and her team had designed. While that project isn't yet come to fruition, it's just the type of project and partnership I'm interested in pursuing right now. One that focuses not just on the development of buildings, but also takes on significant social issues. And here I've got two other examples of the kind of opportunity that I'm seeking. On the left side of the screen is one of several proposals that I made in response to a request for expressions of interest from New York City for redevelopment of the Brooklyn House of Detention. Working with architects MVRDV and Rogers Marvel, nonprofit Common Ground, and Francis Greenberger of Time Equities as my collaborators, we re-envisioned this full city block for a rehab and reentry center with first step transitional housing, other affordable housing, workforce development, and social services, as well as retail, community facilities, a library, and a school. Yes, this did also have some market rate housing to support financially the social impacts inherent in the plan. Although this specific project also never came to fruition, the city itself is now proposing its own version of a justice center for this site as part of its Close Rikers initiative. This is something the city wasn't ready to do in 2008 through 2012 when I was negotiating this project. But I was tenacious, stayed with the ideas in discussion with many city officials, and I'm pleased to see that the underlying social impact that we intended is now underway. The second example shows a building complex in Chicago that was one of the sites included in the C40 Reinventing Cities competition, a global competition to drive carbon neutral and resilient urban regeneration. I was approached by several different architects about this project, and I chose to work with a Chicago-based firm named Civic Projects. And together we came up with a proposal that we named City Hub. It was nonprofit based and modeled after the Brooklyn Navy Yard in order to create jobs for low-income residents in the surrounding community. This proposal was the only one remaining in consideration at the end of the competition. But unfortunately, the city, which owned the buildings, chose not to proceed. Who knows? Perhaps they too will revisit the ideas in the future. I show these examples of projects that I've either been invited to participate in or that I've initiated myself. All were public-private development partnership whose main goal was to achieve social impact. I invite anyone who's listening tonight with ideas like these to reach out to me, and let's see if we together can develop a project that makes a difference. So, by now you may have figured out that my approach to the development business is different from that of many of my fellow developers. While my financial outcomes are the same, or I would be out of business, my reasons for developing and my methods of developing are atypical. This difference in approach describes some further elaboration. So I'm going to turn now to my own journey as a developer and to the projects I produced. My journey started long ago, when I was about the age of the young people shown here in the middle of the slide. That's when a package arrived in the mail. This was way before the Amazon era, when package deliveries occur multiple times a day. It was very rare to get a package, and it caused a lot of excitement. The package that arrived that day contained this book, Cities, a gift from the author, landscape architect Lawrence Halpern, who had been my father's college roommate and remained his lifelong friend. After my dad had looked through the book, I grabbed it and I sat myself down in a corner to see what was inside. Well, I proceeded to just about devour the black and white photos of cities that Larry used to illustrate his ideas about how to create lively urban experiences and interesting public spaces. Up until then, my mind was made up. I was going to be a ballet dancer, a pretty common thought for a 10-year-old girl. But the arrival of the book was a turning point. On that day, I decided I would do both. I would become a dancer and I would build vibrant cities. And from then on, that's what I set out to do. First, I became a professional modern dancer. Then, when I was injured, I became an urban planner. And finally, a real estate developer. None of these transitions were effortless because that's just not the way life works. But I moved forward with a clarity of purpose stemming from that revelatory moment as a child when I discovered my love for buildings and cities in that chance visual encounter with Larry Halpern's book. Today, my identity as a real estate developer is well established. My company, Hamlin Ventures, is now 23 years old. It's financially successful, and it's known for its design excellence and its civic engagement. These outcomes reflect the triple bottom line goals I set for myself and the company at its outset, which were: one, to explore opportunities for creative expression and collaboration through the design and development of buildings; two, to earn sufficient profit to sustain that exploration and support myself and my family; and three, to engage with urbanism and its social and civic challenges through the work that we would do. I'm very proud of the fact that I've sustained a real estate development company for 23 years. I'm proud that I've achieved a competitive level of profitability in what is basically a financially driven industry. But what's truly meaningful to me is that I've done it my way. I've succeeded financially, yes, but I found real value in my work by achieving the two other goals I set for myself: creative engagement and civic involvement. So the Hamlin Ventures project that best epitomizes the triple bottom line approach my company takes to development is the Hoyt-Schermerhorn project in downtown Brooklyn. It's also an excellent example of how creative collaboration can enhance public outcomes. The project was a multi-year effort to develop an entire city block, 2.5 acres of land. The site permitted 500,000 square feet of development as of right. It became available in 2002 when the state of New York declared it surplus property and put it up for bid, subject to an underlying urban renewal plan. I like to show this slide first because it tells you a lot about the context at the time. Downtown Brooklyn then was not the downtown Brooklyn you see today. It was edgy, to say the least. The New York Times, writing about this particular site, said, there are some buildings, a few delis, a liquor store, a gas station, but the dominant feature of this area is parking lots, fences, dirt, and nothing else. Well, from this aerial perspective, you can see the oddity of that condition. The block is vacant except for 5 historic brownstones and a gas station. However, it borders Brooklyn's commercial downtown to the north and Brooklyn's brownstones to the south. Its western edge is really civic Brooklyn. And to the west, just a little bit further, only 5 minutes by subway, is Lower Manhattan. So why was a site like this one sitting vacant amidst an otherwise densely developed, active section of Brooklyn that was so closely connected to Manhattan? Well, there were 3 reasons. First, this site and 2 adjacent ones had been cleared of buildings by the city in 1922 for construction of a subway line. And on the right, the photo you see is this site during its demolition. Second, in the late 1960s, these sites, along with many others in downtown Brooklyn, were declared blighted, and they were designated as urban renewal sites. This made them eligible for federal monies and public redevelopment, subject to a 30% affordable housing requirement, and that runs with the land to this day. Third, the local community in this area that I've circled in red, this particular site and the ones just adjacent, fought the public development and the affordable housing and effectively stopped every project proposed for the sites between 1972 and 2002 when I was considering a bid. This slide just shows you a little bit more clearly the significant impact that the subway has on this site. As you can see the 5 historic brownstones in that carve out, but you can also see that only 2 parcels are completely unaffected by the subway. Well, not surprisingly, as a result of the site's history, it had a reputation of being undevelopable. So what made it attractive to me? And how did I win the bid, overcome the constraints, and deliver a project that was a catalyst for the growth of downtown Brooklyn and a contributor to the greater good? Well, what really drew me to this site was the opportunity to work on a transformational project. How often does a New York City developer have the opportunity to design an entire city block? For an urban planner like me, this seemed like a dream come true. But only if I could figure out how to make the project financially feasible, provide the affordable housing that was required, and gain the support of the community, all at the same time. And that's where creativity and creative collaboration came into play. I needed to think outside the box of the standard 80% market rate, 20% affordable housing finance that was available, but not workable for this site. So I came up with a bold strategy that diverged significantly from the underlying urban renewal plan and would either mean that my bid was totally disqualified, or I'd need to get the buy-in from the city, state, and community for my alternative approach. I decided to take the risk of rejection, and this is what I've proposed. First, I would develop a series of fully market rate, not affordable, single-family townhouses, shown here in green, across from an existing row of historic townhouses on State Street. This, I believed, would anchor the entire site back into the neighborhood and hopefully establish support in the community for the rest of the project. Second, I proposed concentrating all of the affordable housing in one building, shown in blue on the north side of the site, leaving the remainder of the site for market rate development once the affordable housing was complete. This strategy was not an attempt to isolate the affordable and market rate housing one from the other. Instead, it was a creative response to the lack of necessary public subsidies for affordable housing that existed at the time. And as you'll hear, it resulted in a significant boost to the project's public impact. My methodology was to form a collaboration between the city, the developers, and two exceptional nonprofit organizations, Common Ground and the Actors Fund, to develop and own a supportive housing residence, which is housing plus social services, that would contain a theater in the building base. From a financial perspective, this move was key because supportive housing operated by nonprofits is eligible for subsidies from the city that a private developer such as Hamlin Ventures is not. More important though, this strategy would double the number of affordable units, ensure that they remained affordable in perpetuity, and also target them to the city's lowest income, hardest to house population. This was far greater public impact than was anticipated by the urban renewal plan and than would otherwise have been possible on the site. After much negotiation, 2 years to be precise, with the city and the state and the community, my partner, Francis Greenberger, and I were designated developers of the site on the basis of this non-conforming proposal. So now let's take a look at how that vision became a reality. We started on the State Street side, the south side of the site, thinking about the townhouses that we would design to face these historic landmark townhouses across the street. While the community and residents of these houses were intrigued and supportive of the idea of new townhouse development on their block, they hoped that I would take a historicist approach to their design. I wasn't interested. My goal was to create a modern interpretation of the single-family townhouse, one based on an open, contemporary interior that supported the casual lifestyle I believed young families would prefer. Furthermore, the exterior detailing of these landmark buildings could not be replicated. Materials such as brownstone were simply not available anymore. So on the exteriors too, I sought a modern interpretation of the classic townhouse form rather than an artificial replication. From a real estate perspective, I was actually doing something a bit daring. Brooklyn had long been known as the brownstone borough, so there was nothing new about that. But the preferred and available building stock had been developed primarily in the late 1800s and early 1900s. It was classic in its layout and detailing, like the brownstone I'm showing here. Many brownstoners were drawn to this style and to the process of restoring these homes. And those buyers were looking for the older buildings that had as much original detailing intact as possible. There was no evidence of a market for a new townhouse typology, but that's what I wanted to create, a product more akin to a vertical New York City loft than to a period brownstone. At the outset, I didn't know what I meant by this, but I just had a hunch it was worth exploring. So what I did next is what I often do when I don't know exactly what I want to build, and I want to ideate before retaining an architect and starting schematic design. I launched a paid design competition and invited 5 firms to participate. I asked these firms many questions, including, what are the essential elements of a modern urban townhouse? How will families live in the house? How wide should the houses be? Should each house have a rental unit, which was typical of the Brooklyn townhouse model? And many other questions. I used the competition to gain an understanding of how each architect would approach the site and the individual home design, and to test his or her comfort level with having a developer as a partner in the project's design thinking. I'm so glad I did this. These conversations took us through numerous iterations, each of which brought me closer to an understanding of what I hoped the design of the houses would achieve, both for their future occupants and for the neighbors across the street. After the competition, I chose to work with one of the firms, Rogers Marvel, as my creative collaborator, and together we designed this new city block. We started, of course, with the interiors, and our goal was to maximize natural light and create visual connection throughout each house. Unlike a classic townhouse, which is organized as a series of rooms along a circulation corridor, we used the main staircase as a design feature and incorporated it into the primary living spaces. We reversed the direction of that stair and we opened up its treads and created a vertical slot from the top of the building to the bottom of the building to allow light to permeate from the skylit roof to the cellar and from the front to the back of the house. As a result, you can spend the entire day in one of these houses, as I have, and never need to turn on an electric light. On the exterior, our design investigations related to each of the elements of an urban composition: stoops, front gardens, brick color, texture, materiality, up and down entrances, and window detailing. We made many subtle choices, such as using reveals between the buildings, layering the brick plane, and creating upper terraces in order to provide variation and allow a progression of human-scaled experiences to emerge along the street. At each step of the design process, Jonathan Marvel and his team and I worked together to push each other to find more refined solutions to the challenges of the site and to create a new product type that stood on its own as an option in the Brooklyn brownstone market. Notwithstanding the edgy location, after all, these first houses were still surrounded by a parking lot, our design thinking won the day. The houses sold out in record time and at prices that significantly exceeded my expectations. In addition, this project won numerous design awards and established Hamlin Ventures as a design-driven developer. Accolades and dollars aside, though, for me, the greatest reward comes when I run into one of the homeowners, like the gentleman you see here, and they tell me they love their homes and that living in these houses makes them feel really good. Well, typically, when construction is over, a creative collaboration like the one I had with Rogers Marvel ends. But in this case, I wasn't ready to let that happen. I was having such fun that I wanted to take our design partnership further and explore how one might furnish a house like this. So I invited Jonathan and two other individuals, the art curator, Elizabeth Ackerman, and Yale grad architect Jennifer Carpenter, to collaborate with me to create an exhibition in one of the homes that we called Block Party Brooklyn, an exhibit of art and design in the new urban home. We produced an installation that brought the work of 42 designers and 25 artists, all Brooklyn-based, under one domestic roof. Here's how we described it on the website and in the catalog we created. Quote, Block Party recognizes Brooklyn art and design at every scale, from the public city block to the private bedroom, from architecture to tabletop settings. Visitors walk through all 5 levels of a new kind of dream home, where contemporary art, architecture, and design serve as catalysts for conversation, laughter, and argument about how we want to live today. Over a period of 3 months, the installation was open to the public, and we hosted a variety of events. Over 4,000 people attended the exhibit and the events, including Arnold Lehman, then head of the Brooklyn Museum. This provided our artists and craftspeople with great exposure and led, for many of them, to other gallery shows, sales, and commissions. With the sellout of the 14 houses and Block Party closed, it was time to start designing the remaining 9 townhouses for the rest of the block. I wanted to push our design thinking even further. In the first 14 houses, we faced a community opposed to modern design. Now we had a community that loved the houses we built, and I had a proven market for the modern townhouse product that I envisioned. So for inspiration, I took the design team to Amsterdam to study townhouses in Borneo, Sporenburg, and elsewhere. And here you have a sense, this is a construction photo with none of the plantings in place, but you have a sense of the directions we took after our trip. We made changes to the facades, introducing canting to address some of the flatness I felt along the street front. We added thin steel fins framing the windows to provide more shade and depth. And we used more copper and charcoal colored brick to differentiate each house as an individual home and add depth to the visual experience along the block. These homes too won design awards and were well received in the market. The final focus of this design team's collaboration was the proposal you see here for an art park. This was to be developed around the corner from the townhouses on the portion of the site that is most affected by the subway. This required a land use action, however, and although favored by the city's Parks Commissioner, the Planning Commissioner did not think it was a good idea because it meant adding height to a building on the western portion of the site. As a result, this piece of the site, which sits just 3 feet above an active subway tunnel, is and will be parking in perpetuity. While I'm disappointed that I could not complete the block with a park instead of parking, I feel strongly that the multi-year design-focused collaboration between Hamlin Ventures and Rogers Marvel resulted in a significant contribution to the betterment of downtown Brooklyn. We removed what the New York Times called a gaping hole in Brooklyn's heart. And we kickstarted downtown Brooklyn's development with an award-winning brownstone block that provides sophisticated, sustainable homes for modern urban families and delivers an engaging block front for everyone else. The neighbors across the street who fought the site's development for so long couldn't be happier. And yes, if Larry Halprin were alive today, he would recognize the genesis of some of the design moves we made to establish a progression from public to private space and to encourage a rich visual experience for everyone to enjoy. And this brings me to the second creative collaboration I formed for this project, the strategic one between ourselves, private developers, the city, and the nonprofits. As previously mentioned, this collaboration was essential to the project's financial feasibility and to my ability to deliver public impact. It worked as follows. Francis Greenberger and I purchased the site from the state. We then donated a portion of the land to the two nonprofits. The nonprofits were responsible for raising the capital for construction of their project from tax credits and other public monies that were available to supportive housing operators at that time. The nonprofits became the owners and operators of the building, delivering the housing and services that aligned with their core mission. Meanwhile, the public approved this non-conforming structure and agreed to provide the funds that were available to the nonprofits while crediting the project, i.e. the developers, for having fulfilled their affordable housing requirement. We added 2 deed restrictions before we went forward with the donation. And those were the inclusion of the Black Box Theater at the base and a requirement that the ground floor not be used for office or retail, and preferably be devoted to the arts as well. We did so as a way to enliven the street, remove any stigma the building might have in the community, and ensure that the project was actively used both by members of the community and by artists from all around the city. I also reserved approval rights on the design team selection for the project and the design concept, and worked closely with the nonprofits as the building's design progressed. Well, this is the Skirmahorn today. Designed by architects Polshek Partners, now Aeneid, the project contains 217 units of supportive housing, a 100-seat fully equipped Black Box Theater, and the Brooklyn Ballet School. 50% of the Skirmahorn's residents are formerly homeless individuals, and 50% are low-income individuals. There are on-site social services, as well as communal spaces for residents, including an exercise room, computer room, and outdoor garden. And this just gives you a few more views of the entry, some of the public spaces, and a few more views into the units themselves. The building's design quality, its theater and ballet school, were critically important to getting this building through the community approval process. Even the city, whose approval we needed, was sure we would fail to gain the community support for this type of housing. After all, we were proposing double the number of required units, and we were serving a much lower income population than was required. Our presentation team was comprised of 3 women: me, Roseanne Haggerty, then president of Common Ground, and Barbara Davis, COO of the Actors Fund. Together, we made numerous presentations to residents of the community about the quality of the architecture we envisioned, including the facade you just saw of channel glass that would serve as a beacon on an otherwise barren block. We discussed our planned cultural programming and how the Black Box Theater would be available for rehearsal space, performance space, and community meeting space. And we spoke about our educational contribution to the community with a dance school that would serve children from all over Brooklyn, visible and accessible along the street. Our messaging worked. To everyone's surprise, we succeeded in overcoming the community's long-held opposition to affordable housing development through the quality of the design we proposed, the exceptional management track record of our nonprofit operators, and the cultural programming that we offered. All of this got us the vote we needed from the local community board, and the city allowed us to proceed. Fast forward now almost 10 years, and the Actors Fund Theater at the Schermerhorn is a much beloved citywide institution. It has created jobs for some of the Schermerhorn residents and has hosted performances of all types with reasonable ticket prices to boot. As you might imagine, I take particular pleasure in having contributed to the creation of a theater that's in constant use and has played a significant role in bolstering New York City's dance community, providing much needed affordable rehearsal and performance space that has served as an incubator for new choreography and as a launching pad for new dance companies. And finally, I just need to show this photo from the street looking into the Brooklyn Ballet School. Quite a different attraction than the entrance to, let's say, a Duane Reade down the block. And just as an aside, the young man in the center there is now a superstar on full scholarship at the New York City Ballet School in Manhattan. So to sum up, public-private partnerships are a known model for advancing projects that seek to serve the greater good. With the Schermerhorn, I enhanced that model by inviting the participation of nonprofit organizations as well. This deepened the project's public impact, helped us gain the necessary approvals, and ultimately was essential to the project's overall feasibility. The Schermerhorn, as a development strategy, was a true win-win-win for all three collaborators and partners on this strategic team. More important, though, it was a win for the many people it has served as a home or as a cultural institution since its completion. And this brings me to Brooklyn today. Downtown Brooklyn is no longer edgy. As of June of 2020, there were 35 new luxury residential projects under construction here, including buildings by architects Jeannie Gang and Morris Ajmi that are shown there. My project is now complete and has a condo and a hotel built by others. It was a catalyst for Brooklyn's development boom, but not the only catalyst. The city upzoned this area, and of course, market demand supported its growth. My block of townhouses is a favorite walking block for Brooklynites, and to my surprise, for international visitors touring Brooklyn as well. But the most important public outcome here is the Schermerhorn. Its 217 units of supportive housing are the highest number of units for low-income individuals available in a single building in all of downtown Brooklyn. And its theater is an affordable incubator for talent and creative opportunity. The city said this couldn't be done. They even sent some of their employees to listen to us as we presented to the community, not believing that we were telling the community the truth, that this was going to be supportive housing for formerly homeless and low-income individuals. But the city was wrong, and we did it. And these kinds of ideas are ideas that you too can do. And now I'm finishing up by bringing us back to where I began. To each of you, I'll ask again the question with which I started, Nick Cave's question, the one that I want you to keep in your mind and take away with you. How do you want to exist in the world? And how are you going to do the work? You've heard me say that we are all responsible for aligning our goals with those of the greater good. You've seen some of the ways that I've achieved this. You've heard me say that you have agency, creativity, and choice, and that your choice matters. Opportunities abound for you to contribute to your community's betterment and to the betterment of the greater good. Ultimately, this is not about bricks and mortar. It is about people and how we honor one another's humanity through the work that we do. Pay attention to honoring others' needs and their cultural perspectives, and to respecting the natural world that supports our joint survival. And you will be on your way to designing a better future for yourself and for others. Thank you. Okay. There we go.
Hi. Okay, we already have a question. Okay, so for the participants, if you have a question for Abby, please post your question in the Q&A. Put a little button on the bottom. And for participants that aren't asking a question and want a question answered, please upvote it so we know which questions to answer first or ask first. Okay, Abby, thank you for that lecture.
You're welcome.
Like I said, Anonymous already has a question, and it's a perennial concern among minority and women real estate developers and investors is access to capital. Was that a challenge for you? If so, how did you overcome it?
Yes, 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 and yes. It is one of the challenges that is constant, actually. And there are a number of ways to overcome it. And I find that I prefer to work on a project by project basis. I prefer to find partners that I feel core value and vision alignment with, as opposed to what some other developers do, which is create a fund that they then feel the need to get out there and use for their development. I have been very lucky that my partnerships have gone well and have been repeat partnerships. And so I've been able to go back to some of the same investors and work with those people year in and year out. But it is a challenge, absolutely. It's a challenge that I find individual relationship building is the most important part of.
Okay, we're waiting for more questions, but we're already a little bit past our time. But if anyone has questions, we can definitely stay a little bit longer to answer. The person said, "Thank you, remarkable presentation."
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I want to just do it, since I'm not seeing many more questions, I'm just going to do a shout out to a few people. First, my BAS Studio students. And for those of you who are watching, I think you recognize the notion of non-conforming results or non-conforming proposals to public projects is something that we're tackling in studio right now. And you see that I come from a place of encouragement for creative ideas that may not exactly be what the public thought they wanted, but perhaps if they're really good ideas, you'll be able to get them across. And so keep up the great work. I've been excited by what I've seen.
Well, we actually did get another question. Clifton asks, was there a point when it did not seem like the Brooklyn project would happen, and how was this overcome?
Oh my gosh. One time when I didn't think it was going to happen. How about, okay, this is something that I tell to many real estate development students. One of the most important factors in success is tenacity. It's the ability to get up the next day after something seems like it's not going to work or it's not going to happen, and get up the next day and keep working at it. or if in fact it does fall apart, get up the next morning and find another project to move forward with. So numerous times I thought that this project would not happen. And it required a lot of in strategic layering of work with the public sector, with the nonprofits, with the banks, all of the pieces of the puzzle. And it's really what development is about. It's really being able to put all of those pieces together. So yes, it was challenging.
And then Emily said, inspirational presentation and challenge to all of us. Thank you. She actually also has a question.
Okay.
Which cities in the US do you see as on the forefront of doing this kind of work in service of public good?
It's very interesting. The whole political process makes it difficult for cities, mayors, to really be the initiators of change. Oftentimes, you need the support and you need the buy-in, but oftentimes the force of change is all of us. It's all of us, and we need to, whether it's Nick Cave and Theaster Gates initiating ideas for change, whether it's me coming up with an idea for the Brooklyn House of Detention site, or for Bayview, it's rarely the elected officials that really have enough boldness and vision to be the start, the igniter of the change. But you must have them, you must bring them along. They must be there, or it won't happen. So, different cities that we're about to have a change. It depends on who the mayor is at any given moment in time. It depends on whether it's a strong mayor or not strong mayor. There's a lot of different pieces to the answer to that puzzle. What I do say is, we as a society, we need systemic change. And whether you want to talk about it at city level, state level, federal level, human being level, it is something that we need to ponder and move forward with. I can't say that there's a single city that is doing that, but I can say that there's some real grassroots important movement that is pushing cities to take on the policy changes that are going to be needed to happen. Okay.
I don't know if you have time. I have a couple more questions. Okay, now they're pouring in. Anonymous also says we're grateful for your invitation to connect with you on actionable projects. How do we reach you? So if you, yeah.
I typically, I would not, I actually prefer that my business email is the very best way to reach me. And, so I have the Yale email. That's, I believe faculty emails are available. You're welcome to reach me through email, or very simply ahamlin@hamlinventures.com. And I'm serious about that invitation. I can't tell you how many times I've started to pursue projects that have been architect initiated. And I do appreciate that. So ahamlin@hamlinventures.com.
Eva says, from a 73-year-old retiree, that was a wonderful, timely, inspiring presentation for what is available to us human beings. Ellie, who asks, thank you for the presentation. Can you tell us what you think about opportunity zones?
I don't think opportunity zones are really going to create opportunities for the people who need opportunities. I think opportunity zones are a financial mechanism that work if the zone is already opportune, and don't work if the zone needs the kind of investment that, and those are the zones that really should be opportunity zones. So I don't think of it as a social impact model. I think of it as a real estate investment tool. And so if you want to look at it, the impact from a real estate investment perspective, like, I can see that there is impact for some real estate investors, depending on the fact of the zone being basically a marketable zone to begin with. But I don't think it has the social impact that is the excuse.
Okay. There's two more questions and then we can call it, or if you have to leave, we can table them.
Well, let's do the two questions.
Okay. Okay, awesome. So Srinivas thanks you for the presentation, and then asks, the benefit for the community was apparent. Could you speak a little bit more about investors' incentive? Also, may I ask about the cumulative revenue generation within the project for improved facilities or for more projects?
Well, I purposely didn't really go into the numbers here because it's an architecture school, not a business school or a development school. What I can say is this was an amazing home run for the investors. And if you think about it just broadly, we, the developers, did not have to pay to build the affordable housing. That's a major financial boon to the private side of the investment here. We, the developers, donated the land to nonprofits. The way the tax code works, we get tax deductions for making donations to nonprofits. So this, I didn't present this from a private sector financial maneuvering, really good deal, which it was, case, but it was amazing. So that's for the business school side of the lecture.
Awesome. Okay, so Dennis White asks, or says, congratulations on the profound success of your project. Did the developer meet their financial investment goals, and how long did they participate in the project? What was the project duration? So I guess you already answered a part of it.
Yeah, and the project duration was about 10 years over time, and yeah, it was. I'll tell you what it was. It far exceeded, as I said in one of the slides, every aspect of this project far exceeded what our pro forma numbers were. Because the site was so edgy when we first bought it, it was so unknown. We paid very little for the land, and then we phased it. You see that we phased it to take a pretty risk-free approach, working first on the sites that didn't have the subway impact while we collected income from the parking lot around the site. So it just was one of those financial deals that really was great.
Okay, awesome. So we're done here. Thank you so much for your presentation. It's truly inspiring.
Thank you all, and again, thank you to Mr. Bass, and thank you to Deborah Burke for giving me this opportunity to be the Bass Fellow this year, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it, and hope to continue to be involved with Yale over time. Thank you.
Amazing.